Hi, I'm Cassidy. At my wedding, my sister called me a gold digger in front of everyone. No warning, no mercy. But here's the kicker: my groom, the man I thought I was marrying, played the footage. Yeah, he had it all recorded. And suddenly, it wasn't just about my sister's betrayal. It was about the family I'd been supporting for years. The lies they told, the way they used me. They'd done worse than I ever imagined. And now it was all coming to light. How could I stay silent after this? You can always tell when a meeting isn't really a meeting. When your presence is for show, your voice is background noise, and every polite nod is a placeholder for a decision already made. That's what the Thursday review felt like. Room temperature coffee, overly cheerful small talk, and my manager, Elena Trask, in yet another jaw-droppingly expensive blouse, pretending we were all on the same team. I kept quiet, my laptop open to a dashboard I'd spent the last 9 months perfecting. It wasn't just a feature update, it was an entirely new product. An AI-driven forecasting tool that could anticipate financial needs based on consumer behavior patterns. Not just spending habits, but how people think about money. The kind of tech that would, if implemented right, change how financial planning worked across every mid-market investment firm in the country. And I had built it, alone, in the dark, with minimal support, and a deadline that moved every time I got close to it. At the table, the conversation was already being steered away from me. Again. Well, the consumer data modules look promising, Elena said, folding her arms like the concept had fallen from the sky. But we'll need to bring in outside resources to finish the client-side architecture. I blinked once, slowly. Client-side architecture was done. Had been for weeks. She knew that. She'd reviewed it. Actually, I said, glancing at the CTO, who had remained diplomatically silent for most of the session. The client interface is stable. We pushed it into sandbox staging yesterday, and it passed full QA. Elena's smile tightened so subtly, it almost didn't register. Oh? I wasn't informed. I didn't respond. I knew better. Calling her out publicly wouldn't help. She'd claim she missed the update, or that I hadn't followed protocol, or that the staging push wasn't approved. It didn't matter that every step had been logged, tracked, signed off. The truth didn't live here. It visited occasionally, but never stayed long. Instead, I scrolled to the demo environment and tapped a few keys. The dashboard lit up on the screen. Across the table, the CFO leaned in. Is this the full behavioral prediction model? Yes, I said. Customized to each client based on transaction cadence, platform usage patterns, and psychographic overlays. He glanced at Elena. This is impressive. Elena gave a gracious nod. Cassidy's been very helpful in assisting with development. Assisting. I let the word pass. There would be time to correct the record later. Right now, I needed their attention on the product, not the politics. Back at my desk, Philip from the dev team rolled his chair over. He was the only one who ever said the quiet parts out loud. She's laying groundwork to take credit, he muttered, nodding toward the glassed-in conference room. Just like with the carbon update. You know that, right? I smiled without smiling. She can take credit. She can't take understanding. He tapped the edge of my desk. Problem is, in this company, understanding doesn't sign the contract. Appearances do. That night, I stayed late. Not to catch up on work, I was ahead. But because I needed the silence. The stillness of an empty office gave me clarity. I ran simulations. I watched the prediction engine adapt in real time. Every line of logic in the system was mine. My code, my structure, my intuition. And I had a sinking feeling that it was about to be used without me. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Investor demo scheduled, Friday 11 a.m. Presenter, Elena Trask. Supporting role, Cassidy Rowe, technical advisor. No one had spoken to me. No one had asked. I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady, thoughts loud. The investor, Landmark Ventures, a top-tier VC firm with interest in behavioral fintech. The kind of backer that could triple a company's valuation overnight. The kind of pitch you only get one shot at. And they were handing it to Elena. I forwarded the email to myself, then sat very still. If this was how they wanted to play it, I wouldn't fight the game. I'd let it play out. I just wouldn't be on their team anymore when the buzzer sounded. What they didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, was that Lucia Hong, one of Landmark's lead partners, was my former classmate. Not just classmates, we had shared ramen in a freezing studio apartment our senior year. Pulled all-nighters, rewrote each other's cover letters. I hadn't used that connection to pitch the project. I'd wanted it to stand on its own. But now it was personal. I drafted a message, short and clear. Hey Lucia, I saw Genexa's demo with Landmark was confirmed. I just wanted to make sure you know the behavioral prediction tool you'll see is my original work, not Elena Trask's. Long story. If you want to talk, I'm around. I hit send, and then I waited, not to be invited back in, but to walk away on my own terms. Ever been in a room where you knew they were planning to take what you built? Let's just say, Cassidy's not the only one who's kept receipts. I didn't hear back from Lucia that day, or the next, which told me everything I needed to know. She was checking, and she was doing it quietly, because if what I'd said was true, and I knew it was, it didn't just reflect on Elena. It reflected on Landmark too. Their due diligence team would have to explain why they didn't spot the mismatch in authorship, why they hadn't noticed the sudden reassigning of credit, the shifting roles in meeting invites, the subtle rewrites of who led what. So she went silent, because sometimes silence is what power sounds like before it moves. The Friday demo arrived with clockwork inevitability. At 10:55 a.m., I stood by the office coffee machine, slowly stirring a paper cup of something undrinkable, while Elena swept past in a designer sheath dress, hair pulled into a braid, so perfect it probably had an NDA. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my existence, but I saw the tremor in her jaw. Good. She was smart enough to be nervous. Philip passed me a minute later, whispering just loud enough to be heard over the clink of coffee spoons. They're using the deck you built. Didn't even change the color scheme. I didn't flinch. Let them. He gave me a sideways glance. You're either way too calm or planning something nuclear. I smiled, but said nothing. At 11:02 a.m., the conference room doors shut. The blinds were drawn. And I went back to my desk. I opened my laptop, checked email, refreshed. One new message, no subject, from Lucia. Talk to Marcus. He claims Elena led product. Didn't mention you once. Want to meet? That was all. No outrage. No exclamation points. Just, want to meet? And that's when I knew she believed me. We met Saturday morning in the conservatory cafe of a boutique hotel downtown. Lucia hadn't changed much, still sharp-eyed, quiet-voiced, deliberate in her phrasing. But there was a steeliness to her now, the kind that comes from sitting at too many boardroom tables where you're the only woman in the room. She stirred her tea. I waited. You wrote that system by yourself? She finally asked. From scratch, I said. No borrowed code. No generative templates. I built every predictive layer. Elena's been pitching it as her initiative for months. I nodded. She started paying attention after I'd built the second prototype. She saw the traction. Then the investor inquiries came. After that, she looped herself in and slowly pushed me out. Lucia didn't blink. Did she sign anything? Assign you credit. Number Genexa has a blanket IP clause. Everything I built while employed is technically theirs. Technically, she repeated. Then she leaned in. What if I told you I'm not going to sign with them? My throat went dry. You're pulling the funding. Pausing it, she corrected. I don't back liars. And I don't back products with unclear leadership, especially not when there's a risk of internal dispute. She let that hang in the air. Cassidy, do you want to build this on your terms? It's strange how fast a door can appear once someone points out the wall is fake. I said yes, not because I had a plan, not because I was fearless, but because I couldn't stand the idea of someone else cashing checks off my name while I sat quietly in a cubicle, pretending it hadn't happened. Lucia slid an envelope across the table. Bridge funding, 50,000, NDA included. You'll set up the entity. We'll do it clean. I stared at the envelope, the weight of it, the finality. I wasn't just walking away from Genexa, I was declaring war, without raising my voice. Monday morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed, because technically, nothing had, yet. Elena had a spring in her step. She clacked by my desk, with a smile too wide, too bright. I imagined she thought the pitch had gone perfectly. She was half right. At 11:30 a.m., I got the calendar invite. Project realignment meeting. 4 p.m. HR and management only. I knew what it meant. Genexa wasn't going to steal my work and keep me around. They were going to eliminate the noise, tie off loose ends, clean house. At 4 p.m., I walked into the glass-walled room and sat down across from HR and the CTO. Elena didn't attend. Of course not. The head of HR gave me a brittle smile. Cassidy, thank you for joining us. As you know, we're refocusing product development under a centralized leadership model. I said nothing. The behavioral AI prototype has been reassigned. Your role, while appreciated, is no longer aligned with our core growth strategy. Translation: you're fired, and we're not going to say why. She slid a manila envelope across the table. 3-month severance, standard NDA, and a non-compete clause. I opened the folder, read, closed it again. No. HR blinked. I'm sorry? I'm not signing this. Her face tightened. You understand that refusal may affect your severance. I'm aware. I stood, picking up the folder anyway. You'll be hearing from my counsel. I packed my desk in silence. Philip appeared again, hovering awkwardly. This is bullshit, he muttered. Everyone knows it. I shrugged. Truth isn't required here, just signatures. He hesitated. Are you okay? I zipped my laptop bag. I will be. He nodded slowly, then asked, You're not done, are you? And I gave him the only answer I could. A small smile. The kind you wear when you know something no one else in the room does. There's a certain silence that comes the day after you've been erased, not the kind that screams unfairness or rattles your bones with fury. The silence I woke up to was colder, sharper, more surgical, like someone had cleanly removed me from the narrative and expected no one to notice the gap. No emails, no calls, no fallout, just a vacancy, a digital death. At 8:12 a.m., my access to Genexa's internal servers was officially revoked, my Slack account deactivated, my calendar wiped, no trace left of the hundreds of hours I'd poured into development, no trace of my name on the platform roadmap, no acknowledgement of the interface prototype that bore my design language in every curve, every line of code. They didn't even bother to collect my badge. It was as if I had never existed. And in a company like Genexa, maybe that was the whole point. Lucia called at noon. Her tone was different, less cautious now, more like someone who had confirmed what they needed to confirm and was ready to move. They've issued a press release, she said without preamble. They're calling it Genexa Predict, described as an in-house AI breakthrough led by Elena Trask. I let the words sit for a moment. They moved fast. That's what thieves do, speed over integrity. I didn't reply, not because I disagreed, but because there was nothing left to be surprised by. What do you want to do, Cassidy? She asked. I've got capital. I've got the legal muscle, but this only moves if you're in. I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the morning light creep across the city. I had spent 6 years giving other people credit, letting titles outrank substance, letting charm dilute merit. And now, for the first time, someone was offering me not just a chair at the table, but the damn blueprint. I want my name back, I said. And I want the product to live, properly this time, not as a trophy, but as a tool. Then we build it. By the end of the week, the LLC paperwork was filed. Lucia introduced me to her legal team. two sharp women from Boston who handled IP disputes for half of Silicon Valley's rising stars. I signed an NDA so thick it could have brained a VC and reviewed my own Git history with them, line by line. Every line of logic, every test environment, every iteration. They compiled a timeline, a narrative. And when they were finished, one of them looked up and said, "If they claim ownership, we'll bury them." I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted a clean break. But it was good to know we had the ammunition. I named the new venture Fathom, a quiet nod to the clarity that comes only when you dive beneath the noise. Our mission was simple, but not small. Reimagine financial behavior. Modeling for people, not platforms. Make AI not just predictive, but personal, intuitive, humane. Lucia backed the pre-seed round herself. We didn't post it on LinkedIn. No media blitz, no fanfare, just work, real work, free from approval layers and performance theater. I hired 3 people, none of them Ivy League, all of them brilliant. And I got to code again. Not manage, not defend, not pitch, just build. 2 weeks into development, I got a text from Philip. "Elena just demoed your old prototype. It crashed mid-meeting. Error 504. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. But I did feel something close to justice settle low in my chest. "They'll patch it," I replied. "Not without you." I didn't answer because I had already learned. Not every message needs a response. Some just need distance. The real twist came on a Monday. I almost forgot to check email. Lucia forwarded a calendar invite from an investor summit in Denver. One of Landmark's top portfolio spotlights had pulled out last minute. She wanted to showcase Fathom in its place. "You'd be going on stage 2 months earlier than planned," she said. "But the audience? It's the right kind. Quiet capital, early believers." I hesitated. The product was only half built. The algorithm stable, but not polished. The UI clunky. The brand unformed. But then I remembered something Elena once told me, dismissively, when I asked about timing for a beta launch. Investors don't care about the details. They just want the headlines. She had been right. But I cared about the details. And now I got to choose the headline too. 3 days later, I walked onto the stage at the Denver conference, with nothing but a clean black slide behind me and a demo environment loaded on a laptop I'd bought myself. There were no glossy slogans, no buzzwords, no Genexa, just me. And when I spoke, slowly, deliberately, without performative polish, I saw something I hadn't expected from the audience. Focus, stillness. Not the lean-in for the sake of politeness kind of attention, the real kind. By the end of the presentation, 3 investors had asked for follow-ups. 1 offered to fund our entire next round. A 4th came from a fintech firm in Toronto, looking for an acquisition partner. None of them asked where I went to school. They asked how we modeled intention from pattern. They asked how I planned to scale empathy through data. They asked about me. I stepped off the stage, and Lucia was waiting near the exit. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, and I knew what it meant. We'd crossed the threshold. Fathom wasn't a concept anymore. It was real, and it was mine. Ever had someone underestimate what you'd do with your freedom? Cassidy just showed them. By the time Genex's marketing team posted their Product Vision 2025 webinar, Fathom's backend had already outpaced the prototype they were still parading as a breakthrough. They didn't know that yet, of course. They were still banking on the polish, on the packaging, on Elena's confidence, and the residual shine of a product built by hands no longer in the room. I hadn't seen the webinar until Philip sent me the link. Subject line: "You're going to want popcorn." At first, I didn't want to watch. I told myself I had no interest in what they were pretending to be without me. But curiosity has its own gravity, and on a quiet Tuesday night, I gave in. There she was, Elena, standing in front of a large screen, hands steepled just enough to project competence, voice smooth as ever. She spoke about innovation, about predictive architecture, about the future of client-centered AI. She never once said my name, but every phrase out of her mouth was wrapped in the logic I'd written, the language I'd spent months refining. And then, halfway through a demo screen share, the software glitched. Not catastrophic, just enough to freeze the flow, long enough to crack the illusion. Elena laughed it off, recovered quickly, but her eyes gave her away, because when you're stealing someone's work, any malfunction feels like exposure. I didn't smile. I closed the laptop, and I opened a notebook. The next morning, Lucia forwarded me a message from a contact at Rowland and Company, a West Coast finance firm that had been considering a partnership with Genexa for 6 months. It was a cautious message, but it didn't hide the core concern. Heard Fathom might have originated the behavioral framework. Can we confirm leadership history? We've paused next steps with Genexa. That was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the questions kept coming. Quietly, then not so quietly, from firms, advisors, and independent analysts who'd seen my name resurface after the Denver summit. Genexa had bet everything on Flash, but they had ignored the one thing that mattered to investors long-term: trust in the builder, and the builder had left. The breaking point came in the form of a forwarded invite from Tandem One, a potential Genexa partner and early adopter who had for months remained on the fence. Now they wanted a direct meeting with me. Lucia called as soon as the calendar alert hit. They're giving you a chance to flip the entire deal. I stayed silent. It wasn't pride holding me back. It was the weight of it, the cost. I knew the woman on the other end of that contract, Elena, wasn't going to fall quietly. And once I stepped into this meeting, there would be no line left to pretend I hadn't crossed. I'm not sure I want a war, I said. Lucia's voice was calm. Then stop calling it a war. Call it what it is, reclaiming what's yours. The meeting took place on the 35th floor of a glass building downtown. The Tandem One boardroom was minimalist and expensive, with an uninterrupted view of the harbor and a carafe of water on the table, so pristine it felt ceremonial. They didn't ask about drama. They asked about design logic, ethical safeguards, the flexibility of our algorithm. They asked how I built Fathom to adapt to users with inconsistent financial histories, how we intended to model long-term goals from short-term behaviors, what data we refused to use. Not once did they ask about Elena, but I saw the moment they understood I wasn't the copy. I was the source. That evening, the CEO of Tandem One, Celine Vaughn, called me personally. Her voice was clear, measured, and deliberate. "I'm not here to fuel rivalries," she said, "but I can't invest in a company that operates on borrowed brilliance. We'll be moving forward with Fathom." I thanked her, not with rehearsed charm, but with something I hadn't used in months: conviction. When I hung up, I sat for a moment, staring out the window of my apartment as the city exhaled around me. I thought of how Elena might be spinning this loss to the board, how she'd fold it into some larger strategy pivot. I thought of the quiet moment she would have, alone, when she realized the deal was gone. Not because of a software flaw, but because the people sitting across the table no longer believed in her authorship. 2 days later, Genexa sent me a formal cease and desist letter, citing reputational interference. My lawyer laughed. We drafted a response attaching the Git history, dated screenshots, the original staging environment, my name in every footer. We didn't threaten back. We simply clarified where the reputation damage had originated and attached a timeline.